Alright, right now I'm going to change the alternator, well, put a new alternator belt on because apparently something went wrong, and while driving it back on Friday, I think, it chewed up an alternator belt, took it and destroyed it. I didn't even know the alternator was bad, or should I say the voltage was bad, until I was driving and I noticed the voltage dropped from somewhere around positive 13 to maybe 11.5, 12 at best. Now this is at night with the headlights on and the heater on, so I figured maybe I had additional grounding issue, because I've been battling this grounding issue for a while, to include change out the alternator, which alternator I'm pretty sure it was bad, but change out the alternator. This would be the fourth alternator in this car since I bought it. The first one, pretty sure was bad. That was the one that came in the car. The second one, which is the one I had for the longest time up until now, that one I replaced. Got another one in since it's a lifetime warranty. The bolt holes are stripped, and so now I have the one that's in here right now, which is the latest one, and it seemed to be able to produce at least the power for basic stuff that I'm using right now. I do have a later model alternator on the way. It's from the next series 6 FD model. This is an FC. So instead of the nominal 90 amp, which is what this is rated for, is rated for 100. And they're a lot better built than these were. So hopefully I should be achieving a lot better voltage results. But I did actually have to do a lot of groundings. Basically taking all the grounding areas and cleaning them off with wire wheels until they were shiny again on both the body and the contacts and the screws and their washings. Redid the battery connections because they weren't that great, and that's totally my fault. And just did all the basic grounding in the car, in the engine bay, to include the ECU grounding point, which attached to on the intake manifold. I had to redo that, and I ran some additional grounding cables, kind of just for GP at this point, because I didn't have to, but I did anyway, just to get those out the way. You shouldn't have to use additional grounding points. The stock ones are good enough, but when they're bad, they're bad, and just throwing extra grounds at it doesn't necessarily fix the problem. But I went ahead to do some grounds, some additional cable running from some major points back to the body, from the engine alternator area back to the body, from the battery to the battery. Battery to the body, and additional one from the ECU grounding point back to the body. There's one left I need to do, and that's on the bottom of the car that goes to the back of the engine, up above the starter. I want to redo that one. And I might as well redo the one that actually connects to the starter itself, the power. So, as far as grounding is concerned, inside the engine bay, those are the things I want to do next. But right now, I'm working on installing this new belt, because this old one got chewed up. You see here, missing a belt right there, because that's where the old alternator belt was. Obviously, the alternator doesn't have a belt on it. Yesterday, getting it started was a nightmare. I got it running for about 5 seconds before it cut off. I'm pretty sure it cut off because it was stuck in first. And the reason why, in here is actually pretty warm, because I got this heater going. Bought that yesterday, needed it real bad. Right now, you see the temperature in here is 46 degrees. That's not the case before I hooked this heater up. It was hovering around 5 degrees. Last night, it actually pegged -4 a couple times. so it gets pretty fucking cold in here. And I discovered some other things to include. Like I said, getting it started was hard because I use really heavy gear oil for the transmission. This is what I'm using for the transmission. That is the weight that was put in the owner's manual. So let me try that out. Especially considering I never driven this transmission before, so I didn't know how it was going to react. It works great when it's warm. Apparently, when it's cold, it's like there's cement inside the transmission. It's so thick. So I got some advice from some other rotary gods on the forums, and they pretty much told me to go with some full synthetic other stuff. It's Amazon. I love that stuff, but it's expensive, and I gotta get it shipped here. But that, along with the fact that I also found out that I did not put enough antifreeze in the system, so it was partially frozen, at least in the hoses. When I squeezed them, it felt like there was a slushy in there. So I was like, oh, that's a big deal. So I'm gonna have to drain the system, which is not a big deal. It's what I needed to do anyway. But drain the system because I gotta put in the thermostat in and refill it up with the appropriate levels of antifreeze. And maybe find out why it's busting belts. I'm pretty sure it's probably, I mean, the belt was already damaged because I improperly installed it the first time. So it's not a real big surprise there, but I'm thinking maybe something's not wound up properly. And most likely, the only thing it really could be is the alternator, because it's the water pump pulley and the underdrive pulley should not ever move. If the underdrive pulley moves, then I got the thrust bearing gone, and it's a nightmare. I really don't hope that's the case. And the alternator really shouldn't have to be adjusted. But like I said, I did screw up the first time, and it chewed up the belt really bad, which probably compromised it. So now I got to figure out. I got to first put it back on, which is going to be not exactly fun, but it's not hard or just tedious. I got to take off. Got to take off the fan. I'm just going to unbolt these four right there, and unbolt those four nuts, take them off, drop the fan into the hole, and then loosen up the belt's tensioners, and then slide this one on, because it goes in the front, the first one to go on, and then tighten everything back up. I mean, it's really not that hard. I've done it probably more times than I ever wanted to do it, but I gotta do it anyway. Other than that, just looking around, here's the TPS, this unit right here. I'm shining my light on it. It has a narrow band and a wide band, or full range, narrow range and full range sensors, variable resistors for the TPS. You have to adjust these. I think mine is still out of adjustment. This is not the original one that was in the car. This is one of the ones I bought from a guy. Because mine, I couldn't trust it. It wasn't working right. I would get it to the right ohm, and then it would still give me incorrect readings, or at least incorrect throttle response. So I swapped this one out, put his in, adjusted it, and for the most part it's okay. But I still got that problem where when cold, it comes on and it gives me a rhythmic idle, bouncing between, I want to say 1100 to maybe 900, and it would do this repeatedly until the engine warms up, and then once the engine warms up, it doesn't do it ever again. So I'm assuming either the TPS is still bad, because I only adjusted for the narrow, not for the wide, not for the full throttle, mainly because I need somebody else to step on the gas so that I can see what the full throttle ohm reading is. Also, it most likely is probably this unit here. That unit there is warmed up by the engine and coolant. and it is for the fast idle. It basically is a cam in that moves open to allow more in, so the engine rev higher until it warms up. And then once it warms up, that cam closes, and then the engine will idle at its normal idle rate. When it goes bad, especially since this is a car that's over 20 years old, all kinds of erratic shit happens at idle. So I'm assuming that's probably part of the problem. It could also be the back, but the back right here is, I think this is the original one again. I did put another one in, tried it out, didn't give me any changes, so I put the old one back in. So far it seems to be good. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. As soon as I get the new alternator in, I'll put that in, see how that voltage goes, and take it from there. That's pretty much it where I am right now as far as it running. It runs. When it's warm, it actually runs pretty good. I've only stalled it once, and that was only because I was on a hill and trying to get used to the clutch. But other than that, it runs. It idles well when it's warm. It runs. It has no problem running. Doesn't backfire, doesn't jerk or anything. I mean, the suspension is fucked in this car. Totally fucked. But believe it or not, the alignment on it is actually probably better than it is on the Mazda 6. You let it go, it goes straight until it starts to drift. It does drift, but it doesn't push in one way or another. And it hits bumps pretty hard, but it's, struts and shocks are fucked. It has struts in the front, adjustable shocks in the back. They're both electronically adjusted, which is what this is. I am not going to replace it with the actual factory system because it costs ridiculously too much money. And although a great feature to have, I'm not racing. And if I was racing, I wouldn't be using that system. So I'm just going to go with some traditional, probably Monroe, high quality, premium struts and shocks in the rear. No econo stuff on here. But what's next to come is over here. This here is the next stuff to come after the engine's been broken in, and make sure that it actually runs correctly. No, all the mechanical issues are worked out with the engine itself, which hopefully I'm very close to that stage right now. I have about 160 miles on the car. If I can see this. Yeah, I got 168, 162. Yeah, 162 miles so far on the engine. And I can consider it broken in, fully broken in, until about 1,000. Some people say push it even further, 2,000 for a break-in. For what I'm doing, 1,000 is good enough for me to actually start taking it above 4,000 RPM reliably, which is what you're supposed to do in this car anyway. Really bad to not take it to red line every now and then. Here is the turbocharger that will be installed. This is a stock turbocharger that would have came on the stock Mazda Rx7 Turbo 2 model, which is the turbo version of this engine or this car. It's a relatively small turbo twin scroll, 60 millimeter. Really small, but the point is it's good for about maximum 10 psi, which is more than enough for what I'm planning to be running with this, because this is a high compression motor. This motor uses 9.7 to 1 ratio rotors. That's a really high compressor motor. The turbo model of this generation, which is the S5, which ran from 89 to 91. The turbo rotors that came in the engine of that car was 9.4 to 1. So you can see there's a considerable difference between the compression ratio. On the piston engine, there's more room to play around with. On these engines, you don't. You run the risk of detonating and blowing the apex seal, which is very, very common. Most people don't run high compression rotors on the turbos because of the fact that it's more trickier to deal with. You have to be more careful of your timing, of your fuel management, and I'll get to that in a second. But here's the stock turbo. I got it from the guy. Has no play in the shaft. It didn't burn, it didn't smoke, so I'll be putting this in. It leaks all the way because I have to hook the pin out right now. Yeah, but that's the one I'm gonna be using. I actually have two because I didn't do my research before I bought the first one. This is the second turbo I bought. The first one's right here, and granted, even though it's a lot dirtier, it is a different turbo. This is actually a turbo from the Turbo 2 from the Series 4 car, which from 86 to 88. The Turbo 2 of that generation, which although the car looks very similar to this one, the engine is very similar. It's not the same. There's a lot of electronic changes and mechanical changes throughout the car. The S5 is really the one to have. It's a more rare one to have in America. And it shares most of his stuff with the later generation S6 series. So the reason why you can't use this one, even though you can bolt it up to this engine with no problem. It uses a twin scroll setup that is not independent, or should I say, it is totally independent, but it requires you to have a solenoid connected to the exhaust manifold for the turbo to deflect air into either one of these chambers. Well, I don't have that electronic system, and running that additional wires and plumbing to get it to work will be a pain in the ass and unnecessary. When I can just run an S5 turbo system, which doesn't have that at all, which purely just works off the RPM range of the actual turbo. So it's completely different. It's easier, simple system to deal with, and it's a better turbo system, obviously, because it's a later model that came out. Less complicated, and most people want that anyway. I don't want to do any additional stuff. The way I'm going to do this is a 6-port rotary engine, 13B. The difference between the Turbo 2 model and the 13B NA will be that this is a 6-port. The Turbo 2 model is a 4-port. The 6 ports, or the 2 auxiliary ports, act as additional air intake, and they're variable, pretty much like a variable timing system on a piston engine. And that system allows you to inject more air at a certain RPM, I think 3,800 RPMs, and increase more power. Problem with that is you can't just bolt up the exhaust manifold from a turbo onto one of these cars, because that interferes directly with where the 6-port injection system is. So what I'm going to have to do is omit the 6-port injection system completely and run my top end of the engine is no longer going to look like this. It's going to be running actually all Turbo 2 intakes. So essentially, it'll be a 6-port motor with all the 4-port stuff bolted onto it, because they all fit. There is some differences, but I'll get to it later. For example, here's the daughter body from the turbo model, and here is the lower intake manifold for the turbo model. Previous guy painted it in the process of painting it up. I actually already cleaned the surfaces where it made up that really good. And the top part of the intake manifold. I also had, because it's just like any other turbo application, increasing the air charge or the amount of oxygen that's inside the engine, you're going to have to increase the fuel as well. Otherwise, you run into a lean condition, which will then definitely detonate, and you will blow some pistons or some rotors in this case. So I have to upgrade the fuel system. I already have, I bought bigger fuel injectors. Actually, I bought the factory fuel injectors for the turbo model. The NA model comes with 460cc injectors, 4 of them, 2 primary, 2 secondary. The Turbo 2 model comes with 520s, primary and secondary. A lot of guys with the turbo models that want to upgrade to bigger turbos, they often go with maybe a 720 primary and like a 1600 secondary, huge injectors. But I'm not going to. Not running anything past probably 6 psi. I'm not trying to. This is for what I'm doing right now. It's probably going to be limited to around 5 or 6 psi. So I don't running big injectors would just be running a rich condition. I'm also already own the factory turbo ECU. The ECU is different for obvious reasons. It has different mappings in it for the fact that it's run a boost. Now, all cars, even including the NA, has a boost sensor or pressure sensor. The sensor detects the atmospheric pressure around it and the difference. So to be able to calculate how much fuel to put in there, how much timing to retard or whatever. Well, you have to run turbo. You have to run the turbo boost sensor. I have one of those too. You also, because you're running big injectors, you got to run an upgraded fuel system, which means I had to buy a bigger fuel pump. So I bought a fuel pump from the next generation. I didn't even go to the Series 5 turbo model. I went up to the Series 6 turbo model, which has an even bigger fuel system. So my pump should not be the weak link at all. You just don't want to run lean. Aside from that, and the only thing I'm missing now, major component I'm missing right now to complete this build, because this computer is just going to bolt right in. All this hardware here, after I take the old hardware out, is just going to bolt on. There's some minor stuff I'm going to have to do with some vacuum hoses, but other than that, that's cake. And I also got to mount my throttle cable, but that's easy. But the one big thing I'm missing right now is actually an intercooler, because even the stock model has an intercooler. I'm not going to be able to run the stock intercooler. I wish I could, but my hood does not have a hole in it. The stock engine has a hole in the hood. So to run the stock intercooler, you got to have a Turbo 2 hood, and I can't find one locally. Having a ship would be a nightmare. So I'm just going to go with a front mount intercooler. I'm not going anything huge. I'm actually probably going to end up using a stock intercooler that mounts on top here, and just plumb it down to mount in the front of the car here, somewhere down here. Probably in front of the oil cooler, because this car has an oil cooler as well. And that'll be it for the major stuff. Put the new fuel pumps in. I'm gonna run that new fuel pump before I even do any of this stuff here, and make sure that's all good. Then I'm gonna do all the bolting. The bolting part will be easy. And of course I had to get a new exhaust system, because it's running turbo instead of an exhaust manifold. So I had to buy a new downpipe. Go along with it. Take it back. I wanted this to be as factory as possible to eliminate as many headaches as possible. Later on down the road, if I want to do something different, then that's the case. I mean, that's easy at that point, because the factory stuff, once it's in that configuration, it's much easier to do. But yeah, I have to get the intake manifold installed, plumbing and a cooler, which would be the only really custom thing I'll be doing here is in the cooler. Everything's really be just stock clothing applications. Initial system does not need to be upgraded. That's good enough. Actually, it's the same as in the turbo model. The drivetrain is not the same. But since I'm only going to be running low boost, I'm not worried about damaging my drivetrain from running too much power to it, the torque. But eventually down the line, if I like this car and decide to keep it, I might actually change the drivetrain to the turbo drivetrain, which is a lot sturdier, has better gear ratios, and the rear end has a limited slip differential versus this one. It has the non-limit, which, since I'm not doing any drifting or anything like that, or racetrack driving, it's not a real big deal. The gearing is a big deal. I think that's about it for this application. I mean, it's really not that much more to it. Oh, well, there is some small stuff like boost controller and boost gauge. Those two I will have to install. The boost gauge is the only thing I don't have. I have a boost controller, which is a manual dial type system, real simple. I dial it in, it doesn't go beyond 5 psi. I'm only going to run in small amounts. Eventually I can upgrade to a much more powerful system that's electronically controlled, because eventually this is only the first step, running this initial stock ECU, which is very limiting, and it's not designed to be run on a high compression motor. But keep the boost down, you don't have a problem. Eventually I'm going to have to go with a standalone ECU, which is an aftermarket computer, and I already know which one I want, but it's the total package for everything is to include the new ECU, the handheld controller that controls it, as well as the wiring harness that adapts it to the factory wiring harness, is about $1,300. But it allows me to completely control every aspect of the engine's operation, timing advances to fuel cutoff at what RPM, to whether I want to defeat the accelerated warm-up system so it doesn't idle up when it's cold outside. So it's kind of the plans right now. First I've got to make sure this engine is broken in properly and performs without a problem.